My soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, and you are mine. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. You're rich in love and you're slow to anger. Your name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come, still my soul sings your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for those two beautiful songs. I would now like to call upon Job and Merritt for today's Bible reading.
St. Matthew chapter 10, 37 to 42. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses life for my sake will find it. He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. And he who receives a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water, in the name of a disciple, surely I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward. Barkamore.
Thank you, Jobin, for that Bible reading. I kindly ask Lynn Korean to start us off with a short welcome message.
Thank you, Joanna. Respected clergy and friends, greetings to all who have joined tonight's virtual convention. I have the honor to welcome this evening's distinguished speaker, Reverend Father Samuel Verghese, who is affectionately known as Sgmoc. Sgmoc serves as the assistant vicar of St. Thomas Orthodox Church in Los Angeles. Achin was ordained in 2018 by His Grace Zacharias Mar Ephraim. Prior to his ordination, Achin has been working as the youth minister of the Western region since 2011, as well as for the Ministry of Liturgical Resource Development since 2015. Achin is the second celibate priest ordained from the Southwest Diocese. Sgmoc's home parish is St. Gregorius Orthodox Church, Elmhurst, and is the son of Mr. and Mrs. Peter and Lily Verghese. Achin completed his BA at the University of Illinois in 2005. His BD at the Orthodox Theological Seminary in Kottayam in 2011, and MFT from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology in 2016. Achin, you might not remember me, but about 10 years ago, I think you were back in town on break from seminary, and I was living in Chicago at that time. We played basketball for a few evenings with friends from the Oak Park Church. While our interaction was short, I remember leaving thinking how nice of a person you are. You had a positive energy, and it's still memorable to me almost 10 years later. I think many who have met Sgmoc has the same sentiment. I can share another story personally where this is true. A few weeks ago, I was visiting my cousins, Abi and Maya, in California, and we were talking about church. Abi and Maya and their girls all jumped with excitement when they started talking about Sgmoc. The consensus was, Sgmoc is awesome and such a blessing to their parish. Sgmoc, thank you for spending this evening with us. We look forward to your message and pray for your ministry.
Thank you, Lynn Jachin, for that wonderful introduction. Before we begin the seminar, we would like to introduce Reverend Father Samuel Verghese Lechin with a virtual welcome as well.
Jachin, thank you for joining with us. It's your time. It's your time.
Thank you, Sgmoc, and thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everyone who provided such a warm welcome. Can you hear me? Is it? It's okay. All right. So, I think when Sgmoc asked me to speak, he said it would be more of a discussion-oriented group. So, hoping that we can also turn on your cameras if possible. We've been doing this for 2 years, 2.5 years now. So hopefully people are comfortable turning on their screens. We can see faces. I can see you, you can see me as we begin. So let's begin. I know that we finished evening prayer, but just a short prayer to begin. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, one true God, forever and ever. Amen. Barak Amaro, Christ our God, we thank you for this evening and this time that you've given us, especially as we come upon this time in which we celebrate the feast day of your holy saint, Saint Gregorios. Lord, continue to inspire us with his life. Help us to model and imitate ourselves after him as he imitated you. And help us in this evening, in this discussion, and this time that we have together, that your wisdom and that your words may fill our hearts, that we may continue to be moved towards you, and that our hearts may be transformed by you. Through the intercessions of Saint Mary, the Mother of God, of Saint Gregorios of Paravan, and of all the saints, may their prayers be a stronghold for us, and we offer you praise and glory now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Achin asked me to speak a little while ago, some time ago. He asked me to speak on the topic of youth ministry and the future of the church in America. And this obviously is a very broad topic. And I think the reason Achin asked me to do it is because I've been involved in the youth ministry for many years now. Lynn, thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. That was a very wonderful summer. I remember it because I had just returned back from seminary. And I think we have a couple people in this group. I see Bensalem, who's currently at seminary. He was also one of those consistent people who went to play basketball every day, and we had Bible study going on, and there was a lot of activity through the summer. So the reason I'm glad that you mentioned that is because that was very much the beginning of what I guess what my journey in the youth ministry. Long before that official kind of assignment, when I was finished with seminary, I had the benefit, and here Sgmoc also has had the benefit of being under the guidance and mentorship of Father M.K. Thomas Achin of blessed memory. Achin was a man who lived a life of God. He was a man of great love. And he was a man who taught me pretty much everything I think I needed to know about the ministry. And it's there that I wanted to start with just what the ministry is. If anything, I think I've learned more through my failures, because in any ministerial realm, there's so much more failure than there is growth, or there is victory, if you will, or success. And the one thing, I guess, if we were to start, and when I thought of youth ministry, my thoughts always began with M.K. Thomas Achin, because the principles that he established in his life pretty much encompass everything it means to be a minister. As we know, in the Orthodox Church, when a deacon or a priest is ordained, that deacon or priest is never ordained to a specific ministry. They're ordained to a parish, right? They're called to serve the entire community. That's the outlook of the church, is that there's no one who is called to serve the MGOCSM, or called to serve the focus group, or called to serve OCYM. They're called to serve a parish, and that parish consists of the entire community. But there are times when the need arises that ministers or certain people who work in the ministry of the church are called to work with specific categories or populations of people. And I'm going to take it that the community here in Bensalem is multi-generational, and many have been here for many years, the course of decades. And like most parishes in our diocese, in both dioceses, we've had many people leave the church, many who were born and raised in America who have left the church. We've had people who have been born and raised and stayed in the church. And then we have many generations who are currently in the church. And there's a question mark as to what will happen, right? So going back to this meditation on M.K. Thomasachin, his ministry was not just youth. It was the entire community. It was the entire parish. But the principles he used were very much effective with the youth. And I guess I wanted to start there, is that more than the pastoral work of like the sacramental work, which is normally when we think of an achin, that's where our mind gravitates towards. It's the sacramental work, celebrating the Holy Qurbana or leading the sacraments and those kind of responsibilities. More than that, what we see and what I saw with M.K. Thomasachin was a man who was focused on loving the people. And that's transcendent. That works with youth, that works with elders, that works with every generation. Loving the youth, loving the people. And you see that love primarily in presence and availability. That the door was always open, that he would always make himself available, that he was always at any moment's call ready to serve. And it was in all the little ways that a relationship is built that people could experience that love. And I noticed that coming to Los Angeles, I was asked very early on by the youth, actually, when the proposal came as to having a youth minister in Los Angeles, what will you do? Because as a shamashan, the only thing people knew in terms of the church was Sunday service. So I was asked by the youth, shamashan, if you come here, what are you going to do during the day? And I said, don't worry about that. Like, don't worry, there will be plenty to do. And it, like, just like clockwork, the moment I landed in Los Angeles, there was just a number of things to do. I don't know that in these last 11 years since I've been out there, that I've had many days off, right? And the reason is there needs to be presence and availability by the priest or by anyone who's doing ministry. And what happens is oftentimes, because many of us and many people, and I'm talking, and by the way, I speak in terms of the ministry because that's where I come from, but the lay role in all of this is absolutely vital. And, you know, I'll speak to that in a little bit. But the presence of going to campuses, the presence of being able to meet at any time, the presence of being able to have coffee on a random Tuesday or a Wednesday, these kind of moments seem very menial. Yet I remember with M.K. Thomasachin, and Sgmoc will remember this as well, we would go shopping together. We would go to the grocery store. And I think many kids in the Chicago area have had this experience. We go to Aldi and we walk up and down every aisle and Achin picks this up and that up. And the question is, Achin, how can you eat all this food? There's no way that you can eat this. And he goes, it's not for me. It's for the people who come during the week. Meaning Achin had that idea that people would come to the parsonage, that the church was a place of presence. And that availability, that hospitality opened the door for many people to make the parsonage a place of congregation. And so when I moved to Los Angeles, that is largely how I've also modeled the parsonage in Los Angeles. And Bensalem has come and, you know, he's been there, and a lot of my youth basically center around the parsonage. There's always something in the fridge. There's always something to drink. There's always an open door. If they want to study, they can study there. The centering around the church has also created this presence, not only in their lives, but also in the church. So presence and availability are two of these markers, I think, of the youth ministry that's been successful. We need to show that we care first. And that was the one thing that, and this will be kind of that second idea here, right? That we actually care. I group this all under love, right? I group this all under the love that's needed to do ministry. So presence and availability is one thing. And the second thing is that we need to show that we care. The reason I asked you to turn on your screens right, to turn on your cameras. And I know many have, have not, but primarily the reason I ask that everybody do that is because when I look at a screen, I see just the, names of people. There's no connection being made. So for me, that's personally very difficult. So during all of COVID, I had meetings from basically 9 a.m. until 10 o'clock, and it was mandatory that the screens were on, because during COVID, we entered into a period where human connection became so difficult and so hard. And so just being able to see faces and connect was important. That when I ask you, how are you doing? Or Lynn was speaking and I could see him, or Joanna was giving the introduction, I can see their faces, I can see their eyes. And then if we were in a smaller group, I could say, how are you doing? And not just how are you doing and then move on to the next question or the next person, but how are you doing and then caring about the answer. This is the second part of this presence and availability. If I don't have the time, then how can I really care about someone else? So anytime that we're in the room, and this is why I said this is beyond just the priest, this is all of us in this community and all of you who are part of the Bensalem community in what you do on a day-to-day interaction or on a Sunday-to-Sunday interaction. If I need to run to the next thing, or if I need to get to the next objective, then I cannot care about the person who I'm talking with. And I think that's an important thing. And I would see this especially with M.K. Thomas Hutchin, in that he would speak to children. And he was so comfortable talking to children. And it wasn't just go, oh, how are you? Okay. And then he would go talk to the adults, because the adults are where the focal point is. He would talk to the children and care about them. I remember him coming even at sixth, the first time when I was in 5th grade, I believe. And he came to the house and he asked to see one of my assignments from school. And we went through it, and Besley's smiling because Besley's been through this too. And we went through the whole assignment and what I got right and what I got wrong. And he'd care about my progress and my development and how I was doing. So that's something that I don't think we can fake. And the reason I say that is, Sgmoc has been here also in Bensalem for 10, 11 years too, right? I think we both kind of, when I came back to the country is when Sgmoc went to Philadelphia. And I think what you've seen with Sgmoc, I hope is what, I'm hoping that the Los Angeles area has experienced with me. And I think a lot of this comes from the inspiration of M.K. Thomas Hutchin, is that people notice if this is a fake or a genuine concern, right? You could fake people for a week, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, but you can't fake them for 5 and 6 and 7 and 10 years. And that's where kids are watching and the youth are watching. And this becomes that second kind of pillar. Do I actually care about what they're doing? Right? So presence and availability, then a genuine care, right? And then we come into areas which, I think are a little bit more self-explanatory, right? There is a need to teach, right? We need to be able to teach the faith. And I think that's something that in our generation, especially growing up in America, I think one thing that is pretty universal, and I don't know if the environment in Philadelphia is the same, but in Los Angeles and San Francisco, Sacramento, where I minister to, there is a very strong anti-Christian or a-religious influence. Meaning our children will be ridiculed for having faith. In fact, I've had adults who have said that when their coworkers find out that they're Christian, they'll go, "Wait, you're an engineer, or you're educated. How can you also be a Christian?" This kind of challenge, which is not even it's not an aggressive or hostile challenge. It's more of a assumed kind of what's wrong with you? Like we just assume everybody is not believing in a God, because that just doesn't make sense. And I find that with the youth, having sorry, 1 second. having a proper apologetic approach, being able to explain why we do things, being able to explain the value, and not that everything needs to be explained. Some things are hard to explain, but being able to explain even sacramentally why things are done and how this is useful and how it makes sense in also the atmosphere, not only in Christianity, but also expanded out as truth to the world. I think the ability to teach is absolutely vital. Now, part of the problem with teaching is you need people to be there to teach. So it's actually pretty amazing. I think it's awesome that, even here we have 60 plus people. I apologize that I'm the one here. I know that you have other resource people who are actually good teachers who are here as well. So, but I thank you for being here. But the teaching ministry is very important. And I think it needs to be deeper than surface level answers. And so one thing I realized, and Achin would always say this, you have to read. And Achin would constantly tell me, read, keep reading. And I would use his library and he'd give me books. And I don't think I truly understood why that was so important until I began to minister. Because I think my seminary education sufficed for the first year and a half, 2 years of ministry. But by the third and fourth year, by the sixth and seventh year, by the ninth and 10th year, questions and the way the questions were being asked were very different. And what was being asked was very different. And students who had progressed now into young adulthood were facing different challenges along this journey. So even the teaching ministry, if I was not continuing to read and push myself, if I got lazy in that struggle, I think that things would have been worse. And by the way, the struggle with laziness and the struggle with kind of just treading water is very real. Now, this applies, once again, to not just the priest, but to everyone. Because we all need to be, and I know this is a common sermon point, right? Like, read the Bible, read the Bible, read the Bible. But I think we lose the communal effect that has. The communal effect that has is if each and every layperson in the church is just a little bit more competent in the scripture, a little bit more aware of the faith, it has effects throughout the entire community. This is why, once again, when we look at my original point, my original thought, which was the church doesn't ordain for a specific ministry, right? It ordains for the whole church. Because what I realized in doing youth ministry is I could work with the youth as much as possible, but if the parents themselves are not educated, if the parents themselves don't continue to grow, then there's a limiting factor in terms of what the child can do. So I would hit this rock sometimes, and that's why working with the parish and getting to know the families was also pivotal. So then from the teaching ministry, the other thing that I learned was it's important for us that we as a community look to other Orthodox communities and how they have existed in the church, in America. And I think this is a very important thing. When I came in as a shamash, and most of my kids were pretty much, they'd come once a month, twice a month. When they would come, they'd come late. Very few people communed regularly. And the language was a barrier. But mind you, the language is not the only barrier. Everybody likes to think that if we were to switch immediately to English, that all the problems in the church would be solved. That's not true, right? Language is one of the obstacles that come in the way of the youth kind of growing in the church, but it's not the only or the most important obstacle. It's one of the. But what I've noticed in working with the Greek Orthodox Church in America, and in Los Angeles, especially the Coptic Orthodox Church, both of those communities primarily are communities that immigrated. They immigrated from their motherlands, from Greece, from Egypt, and they've been trying to gain a hold in America. And the Greeks have been here for 100 years, and the Coptics have been here for 40 years. And you see the churches that have survived and thrived, And you see the churches that have died, that have no members anymore, that have 5 or 10 members. And we should be very flexible in looking at what works and what doesn't. And here's another area that with, MK Thompson also, there's not a lot of pride when it comes to my way, right? I had a vision. It was going to be this. I reach the ministry and I go, that's not going to work, right? So instead of making this about me, it becomes what needs to happen for our youth to know who Christ is and to grow in the church, right? For the worship life of the church to grow, for them to be raised in the church. So all of these things were vitally important, and it requires us to look very honestly at our sister churches who have thrived, and also at some who have basically died. We have communities in Orthodox communities in America who are teetering, who have no retention, who have no kids who have grown up, who are dying with the last generation, with the first generation that came. And why is that? What happened in those churches? It's important for us to have the humility and the discernment to look at what others are doing and also to join with them when possible. So when I was in, now I'm in Los Angeles, but when I was at Sgmoc, many of the kids were not going to confession. This will be the next point. They were not going to confession. And this was problematic because fundamental to spiritual growth is a confessional life and having a spiritual father. I could teach this, but as a Sgmoc, I'm really the spiritual brother. I'm the spiritual older brother, not really the spiritual father. And so what I would do is, knowing that there would be difficulties and there had been, just cultural differences and all these things, maybe going to our Achans, I would encourage them to go to the Coptic priests. And the Coptic priests were wonderful spiritual fathers, very loving, very open. And so a lot of my youth began this confessional relationship outside of our Malankar Orthodox Church, which was fine, right? Which was fine. I don't think we need to be concerned about them leaving or, going. The key has to be their relationship with Christ. That is the most important part of this, right? And those kids are still in the church. I have not had anyone leave, Orthodoxy. I've not had anyone leave Christianity. I've had no one leave Malankar Orthodox Church. Like they've gone and they've received the guidance and the confessional relationship. They've had a spiritual father, their go-to, and it's been a blessed experience. Now there are those who don't, and you can see the difference. And so in the youth ministry, there's only so much that teaching will do if they don't have an actual confessional relationship. And so that's why I really emphasize this part of it. We need to emphasize having a proper spiritual father. And that we can learn from our sister Orthodox churches, like what that looks like and what that is. And you have a spiritual father here who I hope that everyone is making true avail of. I see also Ebiach there. Ebiach and I were in seminary together as well. And I'm hoping that the community is making avail of the spiritual fathers that you have in a meaningful way. So those were some of the thoughts that I wanted to share regarding the youth ministry. I do not believe that youth ministry is a permanent thing because it's been 11 years and now I'm a middle-aged Achin in a church and I'm no longer a youth. So, it's like, is it the age that is going to keep me a youth minister? So, if Didimini is going to send another youth minister, that'd be wonderful. But we all eventually age out, and we're reminded of our call that we're called to serve the entire parish. And a lot of my youth now have become adults. Many are married, some have kids already. And so, as the generations grow and as they continue, what we realize is that whatever foundation we lay with the youth, we're bringing them up to be adult Christians, mature adult Christians, right? So these are all elements, and there's so much more, and I'll basically ask for questions, but because there's so much that's involved in youth ministry that I don't know that I can contain it all or explain it all. And I thank you for your time and your attention. But these are all forms, I think, fundamentally of love, to be present, to be available, to care, to teach the truth, to provide proper guidance, through confession, and then to have the humility also to learn from others who are around us and who have gone through this journey already. So with that, I will pause the presentation, and I think Achin take questions. Is that right?
Yeah, Ajahn. We'll take some questions. Ajahn, for youth ministry, that doesn't need to be a youth Ajahn. So M.K. Thomas Ajahn, he did the youth ministry, I think it's 70 or 75. So
Yeah,
you can still do
Achin,
the youth ministry.
that was my main point, right? Is that I learned youth ministry from at that time a 70-year-old Achin, right? Like
I'm still learning from Matthias and the ministry. He's 80.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we have, I think, one question. What are the main difference? What are the main difference while communicating with the youth? What are the main difference between the preferred communication styles between older generation or younger generation? Do you have any comments on that?
So now that I've transitioned into more of a, like taking, responding to the whole parish, right? Meaning now I'm doing more MMVS and I'm doing more prayer meetings and things that are not so youth centric. One thing I'm realizing between the older generation and the younger generations is the older generations, and I mean, no offense, because if anyone here is in a disagreement with me, please do say that. But